It's a great privilege for me. As you have mentioned, the Apostolic Christian Assembly was our home church in Bangalore before we came back to New Zealand. And it's a joy to have this connection with the church again. I'm sorry that my Tamil is not so good, so you have to put up with me in English. But I hope that these sessions can be useful for you, whatever stage of leadership you are in. One of the things I will emphasize a lot is that we are all leaders. We are all in situations where we have influence, and that is what leadership is. It's about having influence. And so let's embrace everything that we learn together as being relevant and as being appropriate for each one of us. I thought the easiest way in discussion with Pastor Michael was to do a session on good leadership and focus on some biblical material, and then around that, as he said, include some practical skills and ideas. And then next month when we meet, we'll look at bad leadership, again around a biblical passage, and then also some more skills. As Michael has said, my main leadership experience was about 12 years as principal of a theological college here in Auckland, and I will draw on that experience a little bit. And then I'm now 17 years into working with Langham Preaching, and I'm currently the global director and based here in New Zealand, as Michael said. I wasn't expecting this many people, so I was going to start by having you all introduce yourself, but I don't think that we can do that. But let me work through my material. Please, be patient with me. We will have the opportunity to respond in the chat on the screen there, and we'll have one time where we are in breakout rooms. So I'll be glad to have you participating fully in that way as well. But I thought a good place to start would be just to think about our society. So beyond the church, thinking of Bangalore, Karnataka, India, where do you find leaders in society? What are some of the contexts and situations where leaders are located in Indian society beyond the church? And I wonder if you could just write your responses in the chat option there, and let's just see how many we can gather together. So please respond to that question. Where do you find leaders in society today? What are the contexts where leadership happens? Yeah, good. Educational institutions, politics. Yes, I didn't think that would take too long. Maybe what are the different levels of politics? Maybe if you could be a bit more specific, like the MLAs, and maybe there are other more specific corporate, villages, in the home, hospitals, Are there other ones that come to mind?
In every sector, there will be a leader to lead.
Yeah, there you are. Chief Minister, PM, President. Nobody has mentioned Shubman Gill yet and the Indian cricket team, but also sports is another area for the captains of the teams. Yeah, this is good. Lots here. In schools, student leaders. Yeah, that's very important. The CEO is often the way leadership is thought of. The family leader. Yeah, all of those different corporate school prefects. Yeah, that's good. It's good. Okay, so with these models and people in our minds, I want to ask you a second question. When you think of these leaders and the way they lead, what are the qualities that come to your mind about their leadership? How would you describe the way these leaders lead? What are the qualities of their leadership? Goal-oriented? Yeah, good. That's the kind of phrase I'm looking for. What are some of the other ways that qualities? Trust, yeah, excellent. Trust and transparency, honesty, teamwork, brave, submission. These are good. Yeah, more visionary, role model, problem solving, leading by example. These are good. Many of these, of course, apply within the church as well. Patience, target achiever, kindness. Oh, it's nice to see that one. Integrity, creative, relational, good. Working together. Good communicator. Character, assertive. These are good. Humility, we'll look at that a bit later. Okay, that's good. So we've got a sense in our minds of what leadership looks like beyond the church, and particularly good leadership. And in this session, I want us to come to how the Bible refers to good leadership, how the Bible describes it. And I think it's interesting because the descriptions come to us in pictures of different people, and there's quite a few, but I just selected 5 here from the Bible. So I think there are 5 strong metaphors or pictures, models of leadership. The first is the shepherd. The second is the servant. Then there is the steward, the sage or the wise one, and then the parent. I think these are some of the models and pictures of leadership in the Bible. Now, what I'd like you to do is you're going to go into 5 different rooms, and maybe if we could have one person who is willing to facilitate, maybe Michael, you can make that happen, to facilitate one person for each of these rooms. There'll be a lot of people in it. I think maybe 26 or 27 in them. But I'm going to give you 15 minutes, and please show good leadership skills and try and draw in as many people as you can into the discussion. I'd like you to answer 2 questions. Each group will have a different one of these 5, and focusing on that one, shepherd or servant or steward or sage or parent, I want you to do 2 things. I want you to ask, how do these different people exercise good leadership? When a shepherd is leading well, what are they doing? When a sage is leading well, what are they doing? What are they like? So each of you will have one of these, and then I want you to go on to a second. So maybe split your time evenly between 2 sections. And in the second half, I want you to think about where in the Bible do we find this good leadership being exercised or described? So where do we find a shepherd? Where do we find a sage? Where do we find a parent? So the first thing is to talk about how these different models exercise good leadership. And then the second is, where in the Bible do you find this model of leadership at work? Okay, let's start again. So what I would like you to do is we'll go from one room to the next. Obviously, we need to be careful with our time. So I'd like you to maybe give three of your best descriptions for each of these different types of leadership. So maybe just 3 descriptive words on how they exercise good leadership, and then 3 key passages in the Bible where we see this being spoken about or modeled in someone's life. So, I think this will give us a taste. This is something that could be studied much longer, and we can do that later. So is that okay if we have each group and hear 3 features of this good leadership, and then 3 passages or people in the Bible and that model it for us? So let's go in order. The room that had the shepherd, what are the key features of being a shepherd leader, and where do you see it in the Bible?
We will go for it. So breakout 12, we had it. We have chosen shepherd as the character to find it.
Yeah.
Am I audible? Sorry.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, very good. So the 3 descriptive things. One is that the leader should be caring.
Yes.
Good relationship with flocks.
Yeah.
Never give up attitude, in the sense like dedicative, selfless. These 3 we wanted to highlight. We have noted a lot, but as you said, top 3.
Yeah.
We see in the Bible, first we start with Jesus.
Yeah.
In John 13, verse 13 to 17, we read it. And we see in Moses in Numbers 11, chapter 11, 15 verses.
Good.
Third, we see David.
Yeah, good. And this is Vinod speaking, is it? Vinod?
Yes, Pastor. Yes, this is Vinod.
Yeah, thank you so much. Those are very, very good insights and good examples. Each time I'll just add a few of my own and we can fill it out a little bit. I think the shepherd is a kind of a total picture of the leader, and you see it in Genesis all the way through to Revelation. It is the biblical model of what it means to be a leader, and it covers so many things. I only gave you 3, but when you think of a shepherd with their flock, you think of the shepherd is one who guides, the shepherd is one who feeds, the shepherd is one who cares, as you mentioned, the shepherd is one who protects. There's just so many things that the shepherd does. And it's a very, very important model for leadership for us. Now, in terms of some other passages that came to mind for me, the last verses of Psalm 78 are ones that are worth just mentioning. You got Psalm 78 is the whole history of Israel, and then right at the end, he chose David, his servant, and took him from the sheep pens. From tending the sheep, he brought him to be the shepherd of his people Jacob, of Israel, his inheritance. And then here we have this very important verse. And David, verse 72, shepherded them with integrity of heart, and with skillful hands he led them. So that's a couple of verses that are very, very dear to me. I've preached on them many times when new pastors or new leaders are starting. I think they're very special verses. Also, I think you see it in Acts, the book of Acts, chapter, I think chapter 20, with the Ephesians. And we see where Paul is giving the Ephesian elders a motivational, instructional speech. He says, be shepherds of the church of God. So there's a real sense in which the people are the sheep and the leader is the shepherd. And then another passage beyond what you mentioned is 1 Peter chapter 5, another very important little teaching on leadership as shepherd. Be shepherds of God's flock that are under your care, serving as overseers, not because you must, but because you're willing, as God wants you to be, not greedy for money, but eager to serve, not lording it over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the crown of glory that will never fade away. So even through to Revelation, chapter 7, speaking of the shepherd. And then maybe it's worth just mentioning that twice in the Old Testament, there are lengthy passages about bad shepherds. And sometimes we can learn about what a good shepherd is by looking at the bad example and then talking about the opposite. So both Ezekiel 34 and Jeremiah 23 have extended verses about rebuking the false shepherds. So there's so much in the Bible about leadership as shepherd. And so thank you very much to that first group for sharing on that. Let's move to the second one about the servant. Would someone from the group looking at the servant give us 3 descriptions and then 3 places in the Bible?
Maybe I will share what we have discussed. We have not taken 3 passages, but I will just share what we have discussed.
Yeah.
About the servant, the first one is a leader, one who sacrifices.
Yes.
A servant, one who sacrifices, and
Yeah.
they put others' needs before their needs.
Yes.
Servants look for master's hands for resources, and servants has to be in complete submission. And one great example is about Jesus Christ, as we read in Philippians chapter 2.
Oh, good for you.
3-4.
Excellent,
There
Charles.
we see Jesus emptied himself and went to the point of death on the cross.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is what we discussed.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much. And I think you've really hit the things that I would have mentioned. The servant is oriented towards other people. They're not focused on themselves. So they're looking to live for others, to give to others. And they do this under a sense of submission to their Lord. In this case, our Lord Jesus. So out of our submission to Jesus, as servant leaders, we give ourselves to others in a sacrificial way, as you mentioned. We put others first. The servant is not so concerned about status or power. And I think the other passages, Philippians 2 was an excellent choice. But in some of the gospel interaction that Jesus has with his disciples, about wanting to be the greatest needing to be the servant of all, and he talks about how the Gentiles want to lord it over others. That's the opposite of being a servant, because then he goes on to say, but you're to be a servant. And then I think John 13 and the foot washing story is a story where Jesus is expressing his servant leadership. So these are two, really big ones: the shepherd and the servant. They cover so much on what it means to be a leader, and they are both the example that is just so compelling is the example of Jesus himself. Okay, what about the steward? Can someone from that group speak to what this is speaking about in terms of being a leader as a steward?
Okay, so I'll be talking about steward. So the meaning is that supervising or taking care of the day-to-day activities. 3 features that our team discussed was not ownership but responsibility, and the second one is guarding truth and being faithful, and the third one is ensuring fellowship within the team. So the Bible verse here is from John 15, Jesus washing disciples' feet, that is ensuring fellowship within his disciples, and also Matthew 25, parable of the servants, that he appreciates the servant for being faithful.
Yeah, good. Harshia, could you just mention the 3 features the first time that you mentioned? You went quickly. Just tell me those again.
Not ownership, but responsibility.
Yeah. And then the second one, the next one you said?
Yes, that's guarding truth.
Yeah.
And being faithful.
Yeah, that's it.
And the last one is ensuring fellowship within the team.
Yeah, good. Yeah, these are good. So it's a little bit different. Stewarding, as soon as you think about stewarding, you're thinking about managing resources, taking care, guarding, making sure that people are looked after faithfully and carefully, and they're like caretakers. In many ways, in the creation story, we as human beings are to steward creation, to look after it. It's a really good illustration of stewarding. And so we are held accountable to the one who gives us this task. We are caretakers. And a number of the parables, as you mentioned, refer to this. But there is a lovely, another lovely verse in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, which I think is useful here as well. So then you ought to regard us as servants of Christ. That's Paul speaking to the Corinthian church. And as those entrusted or stewarding the secret things of God. Now it is required that those who have been given a trust must prove faithful. So faithfulness, being accountable, these are the things that shine through for the one who is a servant. Thank you so much. Let's come now to the sage. Someone
Pastor,
speak? Yeah,
yes,
thank you.
as a team actually mistook the question. So we worked on shepherd and servant. So we did not actually work on the sage.
Oh, okay.
So what we did a lot of points on shepherd and servant. So we didn't know that like the number was the,
That's
the
fine.
order in which we had to prepare.
That's fine. So does anyone particularly have anyone on the call, any thoughts on what the sage, what that looks like as a leader, the one who is a sage?
Yeah, I have it, Pastor. A person who lives by wisdom.
Let's hear
Person
from,
who lives by wisdom
yes.
and who guides.
Yes.
Person with wisdom and who guides.
Yeah, that's good. Those are excellent. Can we have one more
Yeah.
reflection?
A good leader who is a sage should be patient to listen. He should be
Yes.
a good listener.
Yes. Yes. Good.
And judgment.
Calmness.
Yes.
Calmness is the main character of a sage. Calmness.
Yeah, good. That's true. Calm and a kind of a quietness, a security, a calmness. I think this is exactly right.
Yeah, and one more thing, I think sage is one who is who has good at discerning.
Yes, good, excellent. These are all the things that I had. I think a sage is one who thinks and acts wisely, and because of that, their leadership is marked by a discernment and an ability to see what foolishness looks like and separate themselves and the advice they give to others away from a foolish kind of life. And of course, we've got Solomon. We've got, actually, there's a whole part of the Old Testament, isn't there, that is wisdom literature, Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. And so this is a collection of Old Testament wisdom, and it becomes fulfilled in Jesus. Jesus is the great sage. Just like he is the great shepherd and the great servant, he is also the wise one. And we see that in something like the Sermon on the Mount. And of course, we see it in the parables, because the parables, if they were in the Old Testament, they would be part of wisdom literature. And so we see Jesus exercising this sage-like wisdom, particularly among his disciples, and it comes through both in things like the Sermon on the Mount, but also in the parables. Then the last one is parents. Someone like to speak to the parents?
Sir, we
Please.
as a team, we did the first two, but I have few points for parent. One is love, acceptance, and assurance.
Yeah, good. Mhm.
Yeah, which our Heavenly Father had on an only Son. John 3:16 says, He gave His one and only Son for the sake of the world. And forgiveness, tolerance, and sacrificial, where I quote prodigal son for forgiveness and tolerance. And for sacrificial, I would like to quote Abraham.
Yeah. Okay,
And
that's
as a
good.
team, we didn't do this, but since all other points were covered, I thought I would do for the point parent.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Is that Catherine? Thank you, Catherine. Can you think of passages where the parent is used as a model of leadership or an example of leadership?
I think a bad example would be Eli, who did not, have a good leadership over his family.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
A good example is the parable of a prodigal son. Good example.
Yes, that would be another one.
Noah led his family in the ark.
Yes.
And he
Yeah,
saved and
so
protected his family. Yes, sir.
these are all examples that give us some insight on the leader as parents, both good and bad examples. The passage that I love, can you think of a part of Paul's
Paul actually, he likens his ministry to a parent caring for children.
Yeah, that's the one I want to mention.
So,
this is in
I'll quote for this, 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 7 to 12, if I'm not wrong.
That's the one I wanted to highlight. Let me just go there with you. It's beautiful because in 1 Thessalonians 2, he refers to himself as being like a mother and as a father, but he also speaks of them as brothers and sisters. So there's this incredible family setting in which his leadership is placed. But he talks about, we were gentle among you, like a mother caring for her little children. So there's that aspect of leadership, the gentleness and the tenderness of a mother with her little children. That's what leadership looks like. Wow. And then he goes on to say, we loved you so much that we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well, because you have become so dear to us. And then a little bit later, he says in verse 11, for you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children. And then he talks about what the father looks like dealing with the children. We just have to read on like we had to do with the mother. And we read on and we see encouraging, comforting, urging you to live lives worthy of God who calls you into his kingdom and glory. Beautiful, beautiful passage. And it tells so much about leadership. Like a mother, gentleness. Like with a baby. Actually, in our home, we had a grandchild born just last Sunday. So they came to live with us. And so right next door here, we have a 6-day-old little baby. And I'm watching the mother, you know, our daughter-in-law caring for it, the gentleness and the tenderness. This is to be how we are as leaders. And then like a father, encouraging, comforting, and urging people to live lives worthy of God. So friends, it's very easy when we come to leadership to adopt the models that we see in the world, the ones that we're familiar with in all those different settings that you mentioned at the start. But one of the things we must do is to start with the scriptures, start with the models that we find in the Bible, in the Word of God. And these 5, in my view, are the big ones. And they each give us a slightly different perspective on what it means to be a leader. And I think the thing that's so striking to me about all of these pictures is that all of them are possible for each one of you. They are actually all things that we can develop in our character and our skills. And in whatever area we are leading, or whatever area we have influence, we can all grow as shepherds and servants and stewards and sages and like a parent in that setting. And this is what I really want to commend to you. It's not just for some. There's a real sense that we can all grow in this area. So if you could put up the next slide for me.
Next slide.
The next slide. Thank you. Yeah, good. So one of the little phrases that I have used through the years is to try and encourage people to see that everyone is called to be a follower of Jesus and a leader of others. This is a great phrase. It's not mine. To think of ourselves as following Jesus and leading others. And each of us can grow as shepherds, servants, stewards, sages, and parents. When I started as principal at the seminary, at the theological college, I was very young. I was only about 36, I think, when I started. And I was very encouraged by it's a secular book, but the authors are Christian, called The Leadership Challenge. So this is many years ago. And in that book, this little sentence near the beginning just kind of jumped out at me and encouraged me so much as I was getting started. And they said this: leadership is everyone's business. It is an observable, learnable set of practices. Now, of course, we need to be doing what God calls us to do. But in whatever it is that God calls us to do, in terms of ministry and vocation, within that context, we can grow as leaders. These are actually observable, learnable practices that can become a part of our life and leadership. And they're built around the very things that you've discovered and affirmed about shepherds and servants and stewards and sages and parents. My wife Barbie and I we've had 5 children. 4 of them are married. We now have 11 grandchildren. But when our children were growing up and going through school, if you asked any of them, even today, they would tell you that this is what we try to encourage in them as they grow up. This next statement, this next slide. Our only expectation of the 5 children as we raised them was that they find a way to serve others and do it in the name of Jesus. So that's their vocation. That's their career. That's their job. We didn't mind what they went into. You know, they didn't need to be in, high paying or whatever. We just said to them, you discern what God's calling you to do. We will help you, but find a way to serve others as a vocation and do it in the name of Jesus. And then the next line is what they would all tell you very quickly. We told them, actually, if you just go back to the other slide, there was one more line there. Yeah, thank you. That we urge them to love Jesus for forever. If God blesses them with marriage, to marry someone who has the same love for Jesus for forever. And then the only other thing we said to them is be a leader. Be the one who has the character, like we've been looking at, that others will look to and want to follow. Don't be the follower. You set the example, you be the leader, and let others follow you. In fact, and our 2 youngest ones, they both ended up as the, I can't remember what you call it in India, but here we call them the head boy or the head girl. So the student leader in the school. And this was the largest school in New Zealand. And our 4th child, the daughter, was the head girl. And that she was a leader, remarkable leader. And then our youngest was the head boy 2 years later. And they had leadership that was quite transformative in the school. People still talk about it. And it was simply by really leaning into, and we talked about these things in the home, about what does it mean in school as a leader to be a shepherd and a servant and a steward and a sage and be like a parent to other students. We talked about that and tried to encourage them to see that these were practices and skills that they could grow in. They weren't sort of some special gift. They were actually things that they could grow in, and they did grow in. And by God's grace, had a really big impact in terms of their leadership as young people. Now, critical in all this, the next slide, thank you. Critical in all this is character. This just cannot be emphasized enough. If you want to develop as a leader, develop in your character. We talk about character-driven leadership, meaning leadership that progresses because of the quality of our character. And so I want to speak about just 2 areas, humility and integrity. If we grow in these areas, then leadership opportunities will open up because people will respect us and want to be like us and admire us. And so the opportunity to lead comes. So let's look at humility. Firstly, the difficulty with humility, the next slide, thanks, is that it grows in really hard places. I think this is the thing to realize. It doesn't grow when you're watching it. You can't look in the mirror and say, I'm growing in humility. But the Lord takes us, the Lord takes us into difficult places, actually. And it's in those difficult places that we begin to grow. So I want to talk about those difficult places and get you to think about which of these do you find a challenge. So there's about 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 of them. So let me just explain them, and then we can have a time to reflect in the chat. So the first place where we grow in humility is when we receive criticism. You get a lot of criticism as a leader, but the humility grows when we respond or we receive criticism with grace. We're not defensive. We just receive it and graciously commit it to the Lord and not fight back or talk back. Very difficult to do. But when we learn to do that, we're growing deeper into humility. Another one is when we see someone else get credit for what actually was our idea or our work or, our teaching. We're watching credit go elsewhere with silence and not just letting it pass. Maybe someone else can speak up for you, but personally, we just let it pass and commit it to the Lord who sees all things. Then the next slide. This is another one where the Lord may place us in an area of service where nobody sees us. It's obscurity. That's what that means. We're serving in obscurity, in hiddenness. And we're calm about it. Our spirit is quiet because we know that the Lord sees. And that's enough. So serving in obscurity with calm. Another one is just learning to say sorry quickly. Sometimes the thing that stops us from apologizing is our pride. And sometimes we lose face. We feel to apologize, we lose honor sometimes, but that's not the case. We grow deeper in humility when we are quick to say sorry for wrongdoing. Another area where humility grows is much of life, even in the church, but certainly in society, is about wanting to climb the ladder, get further, more responsibility, bigger salary, nicer house, better car, sort of moving up the ladder. Well, sometimes the Lord calls us to go down the ladder, and to take on a vocation or a job that doesn't look like it's going up, it's going down. And to do that with contentment out of obedience to God, that's something that develops humility as well. Next slide. Monitoring pronouns with care. That needs some explaining. It's very easy to speak in the language of I and me and my when we're in ministry and we're in leadership. And we stand up and it becomes about us. And that's not the way of humility. The way of humility is to take every opportunity to speak in terms of we and us, and draw others who are with us into what we are saying or what we are affirming. I think this is a big one. I have people that I'm responsible for at the moment. Well, I'm just praying at the moment about this very issue with them. There's too much me and my and I. And I need to find a way to encourage them. No, actually, it's we and it's us together that are moving forward. And then another one, the last one, I think it's already been mentioned a little bit actually, is the ability to listen. Boy, it's such a biggie. The leader, the humble leader, is the one who can be in a conversation with one or two or three people or in a small group, and they're quiet, but they're also the ones who are asking questions. And not only are they asking questions, they are listening to the responses. They're not thinking about what they're going to say. They're listening in order to understand. And it's the good listener who is someone who is learning about humility. And it is such an important quality in leadership to be able to enter into a situation, ask questions, keep quiet, and listen to what others have to say. So these would be 7 hard places, tough conditions in which humility grows. And so, again, maybe just in the chats, which I seem to have, oh, there we are. In the chat, could we express which of these we find to be the hardest? Where do you find you need a particular grace from God? Maybe we can just go through the slides so that people are reminded of them. Okay, watching credit go elsewhere. Thank you, Samuel. That's very much me as well. I find that so hard. Yeah, the second part. Yeah, that's true, Karen. It's the second one that's really needs. Yeah, receiving criticism, watching credit. I think that's a big one. Apologizing. Can I encourage you to write these up, and wherever you have your prayer time or Bible reading time, write them up and just pray through them, asking the Lord to help you with them and to grow in them. Are there more examples? Yeah, here we go, moving down the letter. Thank you, Vinod. Yeah, Robert's the same. It is hard. Serving, yeah. Willingness to accept, yeah. That's a good one. That's a very good one. Willingness to accept changes. Listening to the questions. I think if we were in a group, in a big room together, I'd get us to pray for each other here, because this is such a critical part in growing into leadership. Okay, thank you. Please write these up and put them somewhere where you see them, and add to them. Actually, I have a longer list than this. I collect them and I find them really useful to keep active in my prayer life. Let's move on to the integrity one. This is a little exercise that I do in Langham preaching. The next slide. Yeah, thank you. I think this is from the SciEx classroom, actually. And the little exercise I do in the preaching class is to put integrity in the middle of a whiteboard. Because what I've found as I travel around the world and train preachers and work with our teams is that integrity is quite a difficult word to translate. I think every language finds it tricky. Maybe difficult isn't the right word. Maybe there's so many different ways in which it can be expressed. And so once I saw this, I then started doing this little exercise where I would put integrity on the board, split people into, this is in India here, so I put people into pairs, two groups of two, where they share the same mother tongue, same heart language. And I asked them to come up with an English word that integrity means. And this happens every time. Up on the board are all these words that are completely different, that shows just how diverse and full this word is. So you can see them there, right? Genuine, trustworthy, honest, virtuous, accountable, faithful, consistent, ethical, honest, righteous, faithful, authentic. Is that genuine over there? And honest and blameless. These are, and it's just incredible. All of these words. And in a classroom, this is what happens every time. Put them in pairs and every word they come up with is different. And then what I like to do when I'm in another language context is I ask them to go back up and from the mother tongue that they share with the other person with them, to put up the word translated into their mother tongue, and then I get them to speak to how that word is used in their language and in their conversation. So I really want you to see just how rich this word is, how full this word is, and how important this word is, that we be growing in our integrity. So just the next slide. Yeah, so there are different Bible verses, I think, that speak about this quite helpfully. The Psalm 51, where David is confessing. Excuse me. You desire truth in the inner parts. That's a prayer for integrity. And the next one. My grandfather used to give this to me every year for my birthday. Keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it flow the issues of life. That's integrity. That's talking about integrity. And then the next one. Watch your life and doctrine closely. So watching your life closely is an integrity issue. And then the next slide, I think there are different qualities that come to mind with integrity. Excuse me. One is the word that is often used, I think, is the idea of blameless, so that when you look at a person of integrity, you can't blame them for anything. You know, they're blameless. And the three qualities, or the three characters in the Old Testament that really stand out in this area are Joseph and Esther and Daniel. In fact, this has impacted me all my life, those three characters. In fact, our youngest son is called Joseph Daniel for this reason, that we asked the Lord that he would be so at work in his life, that he would grow as a blameless person like Joseph and Daniel in the Bible. So it's a blameless quality, that nothing sticks to the person of integrity. No criticism, or that people can't judge them and have that judgment ring true, because there's just such a character at work there. Then the next one, they have a transparency about them. I don't know if this works in other languages, but in English we talk about someone having a see-through quality. Actually, it's kind of like the word sincerity. And sincerity means that you can see through them. Who they say they are is who they really are. And you can look through them, and there's no obstacles or deceptions or anything there. You just see right through them. What they say they are is who they are. And it's a beautiful quality to have, that kind of transparency. Then another one. This is where you play a little bit with the word integrity, because it's also in mathematics, isn't it? An integer. It's the same idea. And an integer is a whole number, right? So it's a person with integrity is a person who's whole. And you could almost say without holes, not just whole with a W, but without gaps. They're fully integrated in their life. And then I think one more. Integrity has an honest quality. I think a lot of issues in leadership come, we'll look at this next time, when people start playing politics, start manipulating people, starting rumors or gossip, or saying one thing to one person and another thing to another person. These are the problems with leadership, and they lack honesty, a consistency in their conversation. So those are two character qualities. And then just the next slide. I think what I really want you to take away from this first session is that the first and best way to develop as a good leader is by having our character grow deep into humility and into integrity. Make it your goal, make it your prayer. And you watch the way the Lord opens up the path into wider influence as you allow these things by His Spirit to go deeper. And I think it needs to be said that leadership is less about personality, having a kind of personality. It's less about having charisma. It's less about, whether you're born with it or not. I'm not too sure that's quite how leadership works. And it's not even really about whether you've got the gift or not. It's about character and growing deep in character. And as you do that, your circle of influence will widen and your leadership will grow. And particularly as you step into the things that God has called you to do and to be. So I want to finish each of these two sessions with some convictions or just some lessons that I've learned along the way or am learning. But before we go there, I know there's lots of you, but I'm going to take the risk of seeing if there's any questions that people might have. Maybe Michael can help me answer them. He's a leader that I admire so much. So maybe we could take 2 or 3 questions, and then the rest of the time I want to look at these different convictions. So does anyone have a question that's on their mind? Okay, then let's move on to these.
Pastor, I have a question.
Oh yeah, please.
everybody talks about mature people being leaders. So what's your comment on maturity and leadership? How much does maturity influence a person's leadership?
What do you mean, Malvika, is it? What do you mean by maturity?
That's a very, very unclear idea about maturity, because on context wise, we talk about maturity. So in whole, does maturity have a play in leadership? Maturity in the sense, maybe sometimes it works on experience, sometimes it works on having excess knowledge on a context. So it varies point to point, but does it actually influence leadership? Or if I should rephrase my question, can the youngest of all be a leader?
Yeah, I thought that might be what you were asking. And I would say most definitely yes. I think we should be training our children and our young people to be leaders in their own way, in their own context, to make good decisions. All these things we're talking about, they can be that from a very young age if we help them and encourage. And I think what I have tried to do is, sometimes if you come to church or you're in a small group of some kind, we can enter into that group and we may have a mindset that says, oh, some people here are leaders and some people here are not leaders. I think pastors can be like that because they're told and they're taught to invest in the people who have potential. So that means that they will walk into a group of people in their church. They're looking to who's the one with potential and who's the one without potential. And I'm going to invest in the one with potential, or the one maybe like you're saying, Malvika, the one with maybe greater maturity. Now, there's some truth to that. You do want to make a good investment in people. But I think it's much healthier in a church community to walk into that group of people, not trying to decide who's going to be the leader and who's not going to be the leader, but to walk in and say, all of them are leaders. That's my assumption. Until they prove otherwise, I am going to assume that they are all leaders, and I am going to work in a way to serve and shepherd and steward them to draw out their leadership capacity, skills and practices and character. And I think that's a much better way to work within a community. So coming back to your question, in that group, there will be people of varying maturity, whether that's age or experience. That will affect maybe how influential their leadership will be, but all of them have a capacity to grow as a leader by developing character and the models that we've looked at. So I wouldn't say someone without maturity is ruled out as a leader. They may have less influence, but they are leaders, and we should be encouraging that in them.
Thank you, Pastor.
Maybe one more question? You want to read that out for me, Vinod? I just got the start of it. Could you maybe say it out loud, that question?
Yeah, sure, Pastor. See, in the corporate, we are like leadership is about your action and being an example, but now we heard about character is important. I'm just trying to understand, seek your opinion, how it differs from what we learned today. Character is important, right? Or it's all same. Action, example, character, all same. Just need a clarity. How do we define leadership?
Well, I think if we say action, if we're talking about skills, practices, the ability to do certain things that are leadership tasks, yes, that's still part of leadership. There are still skills and activities to learn. But as a Christian leader, it's not enough just to do the skills or do the activity. As a Christian leader, we bring biblical models and biblical character as people into that leadership. And that then becomes what kind of defines us as a leader, is our character more than our skills. The skills are still important, but the key is that they're coming from a kind of character that we've looked at today. Okay, let me just finish with these convictions, so lessons I'm learning along the way. And I've got 20 of them, so we'll work through them very quickly. And I'm just trying to give you, what am I trying to do here? I'm trying to give you a sense of the bigger picture of leadership. And I would hope that some of these would be really practical for you, that you could go away and begin to look to apply in the context where you lead. So let's look at these together. Number one, trust. If you don't have trust, you don't have anything. And so it's important when you step into leadership roles that you think very carefully about how do I build trust within the group that I lead in an authentic way. And so I think it works a little bit like a bank account. So you need to make lots of deposits. You need to build trust. You need to build that account, because the time will come when you have to make withdrawals, where you have to do difficult things as a leader. And if you don't have trust in the account, your leadership will be very vulnerable. So let me talk, I'm going to linger with this one more because it is so critical. Let me talk a little bit about two things. One, how do you build trust? And then I want to talk a little bit about my time as a principal, because this was a very big area for me. So if I could just take a few minutes. So how do you build trust? Well, one is listening. To be known as a good listener, attentive listener, a listener who's listening to understand, not to respond, and really attentive to people. That builds trust. Another very practical one is that when you make decisions or you agree to do something, you do it. That you're known for to be someone who carries through on your commitments. That builds trust. Another one that builds trust is when people are in trouble. They're going through a tough time, that you have empathy and that you suffer with them. That's what compassion means, actually, that you suffer with people who are in trouble. And one of the really famous writers in the area of leadership is a guy called Max Dupre, and he wrote a book called Leading Without Power. Now, power is part of leadership, but there's good power and there's bad power, as we'll look at next time. But this is a phrase I thought a lot about. How do I lead without displays of power, maybe overstating my authority, maybe being too much the disciplinarian? How do I just lead through the sheer quality of my character and the clarity of my skills so that I don't have to have displays of power? And yet the influence is happening. Now, when I went to Carey as principal, as I said, I was very young. In fact, I was the youngest on the staff. Everyone, even the receptionist, was older than me. I was an outsider for the first time in 50, maybe 60 years. I was a principal who was not a graduate of the college, so I wasn't a former student. And theologically, I was seen to be an outsider. I was seen to be more conservative, maybe, or more evangelical. And so people were not too sure about me. So this was a very difficult situation, and I had to build trust. And these were some of the things I tried to do, and maybe this will be helpful for you. I had a structured listening exercise right across the country. I would have these dinners, and I would invite people, and then I would have questions that I asked them. I wrote up all these questions and their responses and produced this big report, circulated it. And this was a lot of my first year. I was in a situation where I needed to build trust. I needed to invest in it. And so I spent all this time listening and allowing what I heard to shape the direction in which the college was going to go. Another thing was that there were a lot of critics of the college, many of them very significant leaders in the denomination. I invited those critics to come to the college, speak at chapel, and share their story. And I found that this softened their criticism and built trust with them. Another one, which I'll come to again, is in the whole area of communication. When we are in leadership roles, even small ones we may think are small, communication is so important, and we do it early, we do it fully, and we do it openly. This builds trust. And in that context, in the seminary, another thing that I worked hard at was to treat students as adults and respect their opinion and want their opinion. So to not create kind of that hierarchy or that I'm up here and you're down here, but to really respect them as adults, to draw them into the vision of the college and help them feel a part of things. That, I think, helped me a lot. So yeah, those are some of the things. There's a little book I have here on my shelf called Unnatural Leadership. And in it, the person makes it almost doesn't sound right, but it says something like this: trust people before they've earned it. And I've tried to follow that guideline, but with people of character. So if I've got someone who I'm caring for as under my leadership, and I really sense they are a person of real character, you know, the humility and the integrity, the serving and the shepherding, you know, it's really there, even if it's just a glimpse of it, a taste of it, I will tend to trust them before they fully earned it, because I think because they've got this character in place, when given responsibility more than they might expect, I think they rise to the challenge and they can manage it, and off they go, growing as a leader. So this is a huge area, particularly if you're younger leaders. Think deeply about how to build trust. Not just because it's the means to the end, you know, it means that you can make your decisions like, no, just genuinely and authentically build communities where there is trust and confidence. So that's the first one. Let's go to the second one. The second one is about vision. You hear a lot about vision casting or visionary leadership. And these are not wrong. I'm not going to criticize that. It's just that I have noticed over the years that the vision casting kind of leader can also be the leader who maybe uses power a little bit inappropriately or in a way that's not helpful. They are assertive from the front, and this is what we're going to do, and this is the direction we're going to go, and people just follow along. I think a much better approach is not to be a caster of vision, but a creator of vision, to facilitate it. So over the years, I've developed different listening exercises with students, with staff, where I try to draw out from them their vision. You know, what is their dream? And then see my role as a leader to facilitate their dreams and be someone who is helping them nurture their visions. So that's what I mean by facilitating it in others. And then I think the art of leadership, when you hear all these visions and dreams, is to discern which are the dreams to run with, to go with. But it is about gaining the trust and then drawing out of people the dreams that they have, the vision that they have, and running with that vision. I think this is tremendously healthy for a Christian community and Christian ministry. If vision casting isn't wrong, visionary leadership isn't wrong, but I think this approach really works to develop healthy Christian communities. Okay, the next one. Sometimes when you step into leadership, you realize that people have perceptions of a church, or they have a perception of a ministry within the church, or for me at the college, or even here in Langham preaching, there's a perception. Now, what do you do, particularly when you know the perception is wrong, that it's not accurate? Well, I would argue that you treat it as if it's right and then lead accordingly. So accept the perceptions, even if they're wrong, they're not accurate, but then lead in a way that looks to correct those perceptions, and do it that way rather than being defensive or, pushing back, or, raising our voices and saying, no, that's not right. No, accept it. Like for the college where I was, it was perceived to be more liberal in its theology, not really honoring the Bible and honoring Christ. It was what we call liberal theology. And I thought when I got there and met the staff, well, that's not really fair. But I made a conscious effort to accept that perception and then to try and lead in a way that corrected it without ever becoming defensive. Another one, power. Leadership is about power. If leadership is about influencing others, then it's about power. That's what it is. Now, power can be good, power can be bad. But I think the safe way to proceed in leadership, particularly as you're getting started, is to look for ways to share power. So if you think of a ladder with all the rungs, and the leader is on a rung quite high up in the ladder and looking down at all the people they're leading in the lower rungs, well, the way I would play with that image is to try and bring all those people up onto my rung as much as possible and share leadership with them. And so, particularly amongst younger generations, things like delegating, collaborating, these are very, very important skills to develop. And I think what people like who are being led is not just to be given tasks to do. Now, please, would you do that? They like to be given responsibility for that task. It's a little bit different, to be delegated. All right, this is your area of ministry. You are responsible for it. I'm not going to tell you what to do. This is your responsibility. And then, you can keep in touch with them and see how they're doing. But looking always for ways to share the leadership in a way that shares the power. I love what goes on in the New Testament about how Paul shares leadership with the next generation. You look at like Colossians, which starts by saying Paul and Timothy. Well, Timothy's his son. Timothy is his next generation down. And then through the letter, we see we proclaim him, we this, we that. Paul is sharing leadership with someone in the next generation. Now, I've lived in India, I've traveled around Asia, and it's not just in those contexts. I see it here as well. I think one of the challenges is that we are slow to give leadership responsibility to the next generation. The older people hang on for so long, and we should be drawing the others in. We should have our Timothys, and we should speak in the language of we. that this younger generation and us are leading together. It's very countercultural, and it's an area that I think we need to explore. Okay, number 5. This comes back to this issue of information. Let me just read what's there. If it is not confidential information, and it may be, but if it really isn't, pass it on as early, as fully, and as widely as possible. Withholding information is one of the great abuses of power. People who hold on to information that could be shared, but it's a power play. They're on the inside, they know something and everyone else doesn't. And that's a power play. And I think it's much better when you're a leader. If it is not confidential, share it. And it will build the sense of community as information is shared, communication is full and clear, it draws people in. Very simple. Okay, number 6. We'll come back to God and team leadership. God, the Trinity, is a team. We're made in the image of a team. And so actually the way to lead is by building teams and leading through teams. And we'll come back to that. But this is quite a little bit different. I think it's important as leaders that we really are submissive to God. We really are obedient. We are dependent on him. He really is our Lord. Because what happens is it's common for division within a community to be an extension of a leader's own lack of submission to God. Now, sadly, I've seen this in my own leadership experience, where when I myself am not obedient and living in submission to God in some way, maybe some sin in my life or some unforgiveness or an area of deception, when things are not clear between me and God and I'm genuinely submitted to him, this lack of submission in me as the leader has a way of finding expression in the wider community in some kind of division. So it's really important to submit to him, and it has impact on those that we lead. Then emotion. Now, this may not be true of everyone, but I find, and others I speak to, find leadership to be it's very draining and very tiring. I once, when I was in real trouble, just exhausted and maybe close to burnout, I'm not sure. And I met with every month for breakfast with the executive of the board, and we sat down this one morning for breakfast, and I was expressing this to him, and he pulled a napkin. I don't know, I can't remember what in India, but just the white thing on the table of the restaurant, took out his pen, and he drew a picture of a bathtub. I know in India mostly showers, but if you can imagine a bathtub, so a big bath where you go in, you sit in it for your bath, and then he drew a tap, and he drew what we would call the plug hole where the water goes out. And he just looked at me and he said, "Paul, you cannot sustain a leadership responsibility if more is going down the plug hole in terms of draining you than is coming through the tap to replenish you and refresh you. So you need to go away and think about the plug hole and what's draining down, and think about the tap and what replenishes you, and you have got to change the flow. You have got to find a way to have more coming out of that tap so that the bathtub is not empty." And I went away, and within a couple of days, I realized what I was lacking. Like many leaders, I was lonely, and I felt isolated. And I thought about my friends, and I wrote to one of them, and I said, Tony, Michael may know him. He used to come to SciAx quite a lot. Tony Plews. I said to Tony, listen, this is the situation I'm in. I got this empty bathtub that I'm struggling with. I need a friend who will be alongside me, who will meet with me, who I can hang out with, who will just encourage me and just be part of the tap. And he agreed to do that, and he continues to do that. And so this is key, this area of emotion, not just mental, not just spiritual, not just psychological, emotional. It's very draining to be a leader, and we need to look for ways to turn the tap on a little bit more so that there is this sense of replenishing or refreshing that's going on. Number 8 is the pronoun. We kind of talked about this under humility. Even now with my preaching, in one of the last edits that I will do of my sermon, I will look for the me, the my, the I in my notes and ask myself, is that really necessary? Are there ways that I could speak more in the accent of we and us? I think really good leaders speak in the accent of we and us, and they really work hard to minimize how much they talk about me and my and I. So I think that's an important skill. And then number 9, it's all about, you don't have to become absorbed with yourself. Maybe you're aware, I think in the West and maybe in urban India as well, narcissism is quite a problem, where people, it's as if they look out at the world through a window and the whole window is a mirror, everything they see somehow reflects on them and impacts them. And it's not a healthy way. So I'm not talking about self-absorption. I'm not talking about narcissism, but being self-aware is critical as a leader to, I think this is the same wording as the last one. So let me just read it in English slowly. It's about recognizing your own rhythms through the day or through the week, just understanding yourself, your personality, particularly your weaknesses. Sometimes with leadership, we run straight to the gifts and the things that we're good at, our strengths, and we live in our strengths. In fact, that's the advice you often get. Find what you're good at, find what your gift is, and live in that and lead in that area. Well, there is some truth. Don't hear me saying that that's not good advice. But I do have a problem with it. Because really the growth comes when we attend to our weaknesses. It's our weaknesses actually that determine how effective our leadership will be. We can have the greatest skills and strengths and gifts in the world, but what will determine how effective our leadership is actually our weaknesses. And so working at our weaknesses and allowing, how have I written this here? Letting the grace of God work away at our weaknesses, not being defensive, but allowing God to transform them by His grace. And this is the relationship with ourselves that we want to have. One that is very aware of where we're weak, and by the grace of God and the help of close friends, strengthening that weakness. Very important. And then the last one for today is where I started. I think there's a bit of demystifying of leadership that needs to go on. You know, sometimes I've already said this. You know, some people have it and some people don't have it. Who is in each group? And I'm going to work with those that have it, or, you know, that it's somehow a part of our genes. You know, some are born with it and some aren't. These are not helpful. I think one of the best things you can do within a church community, as I've said already a number of times, is to look at everyone as a potential leader. Everyone is called to be a follower of Jesus and a leader of others. So whether they are very young or much older and retired, you know, and elderly, look for ways to draw out their leadership, remembering that leadership is about influencing others. It's about, you know, exerting influence for good and for God. And everyone can do that, regardless of their age and stage. It's by being a shepherd and a servant and a steward and a sage and a parent, like a parent, and having character that's humble and full of integrity at whatever age, whatever stage, whatever circle of leadership. Draw that out and encourage it in others, and let it be encouraged in you. And yeah, under God's good hand and in the way He works, He will open up a growing opportunity to lead in His kingdom and in His church. So let me pray for you. I think we've reached our finishing time for today, but let me just pray for you, and then I'll pass back to Michael. Loving God, I just feel so overwhelmed by the privilege of, even though I can't see them, knowing that there's this number of people who are spending their Saturday morning listening to some guy in New Zealand encourage them in their leadership. We thank you for the Lord Jesus, who is such a model for us in all these areas. And I pray that you will encourage each person on this call, whether they consider their leadership to be significant or their leadership to be non-existent. I pray that they will go away from this conversation, this session together, with a real excitement about looking for ways to put into practice what we've talked about, and under your gracious hand, seeing their opportunities to lead grow and widen and spread and deepen and become in time really significant in the ways of your mission in the world. And we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.